I was growed up when the war come, and I was a mother before it closed. Babies was snatched from their mothers' breasts and sold to speculators. Children was separated from sisters and brothers and never saw each other again. Course they cry. You think they not cry when they sold like cattle? I could tell you about it all day, but even then you couldn't guess the awfulness of it. Delia Garlick, former slave, Montgomery, Alabama. Fine black boy for sale. Separation and loss among enslaved children. A vague fear came over me, but I did not know why. Thomas Lewis Johnson, former slave. Early in the fall of 1836, N.A. Hinkle of Snickersville, Virginia, wrote a letter of 5 lines to slave trader William Crow in Charlestown, Virginia. A friend of mine, the letter said, has a fine black boy that is now in the market for sale, and I told him that I would write to you about him. He is about 12 years old, not tall for his age, but very stout. You had better come over or send some word immediately about him, if you want to get him. The brief communication was layered with significance. A child for sale, a sense of urgency, the need to act immediately to stave off competition, or perhaps to get this boy to a purchaser in time for the harvest. The boy was 12 years old, ready to be put to work in the fields or in a craftsman's shop to learn a trade. He was not tall, but his strong, sturdy body rendered him capable of doing the hard labor that a new owner would require. Hinkle wrote to a likely purchaser. William Crow was in the business of purchasing people in Virginia and imprisoning them in the basement of his house until he had enough to send to New Orleans, where his agent sold them at market. Seething silently between the lines of Hinkle's business proposition is a layer that concerns the child's feelings, his thoughts, and his emotional ties to parents, siblings, friends, and place. Sale of this child would almost certainly result in separation from his family, but Hinkle, acting as the middleman in this proposed transaction, gave no apparent consideration to such concerns. In contrast to Hinkle's silence, this chapter examines the emotional lives of those African American children who experienced separation from families either through their own sale or through the sale of parents or siblings. Although we may never learn any more about this specific unidentified black boy who for a fleeting moment anonymously entered the historical record, sources produced by former slaves, slave owners, and slave traders provide a degree of access to the lives of young people who had similar experiences. We do not know if this particular boy found himself chained in William Crow's basement before making the trek to New Orleans, but others who left records of their lives help us to gain some sense of what it was like for a child to be sold and taken far away from home and family. Scholars who write the history of children or childhood note that children leave behind few records with which historians can work. Enslaved African American children left even fewer than most. What we know of their thoughts, feelings, and experiences is refracted through the memory of the adults they became. We must rely, then, on adult memories of childhood, however flawed memory may be, or leave these lives unexamined. The narratives that African Americans wrote or dictated in the 19th century, as well as the memories they shared with government-employed interviewers long after slavery had ended, are key sources of insight into how enslaved children experienced family separation. These autobiographies and interviews allow us into the world in which children came to understand that they could be treated as commodities, that they could be sold, and that frequently sale meant their families would be broken apart. These sources also divulge how parents responded to the loss of their children. Through accounts of a mother's anguished wail or a father's lapse into depression, we are able to see the impact of separation on enslaved parents.